Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Academic Misfits. I'm your host, Luna Munoz, and I'm joined today by Nicole Janz. And before I do that, I just wanted to introduce myself a bit. So, I had did my PhD in the US. I'm originally from Puerto Rico, Caribeña, Boricua, and I came to Sweden and then the UK to try to get away from the American tenure system. But I just got caught up in the systems that are over here. And I just say, I ended up in like the king of or queen of imperialism rather than staying in the US. And so I felt like I just kept looking for good academic systems, like, a disillusioned socialist or Democrat looking for the perfect political party. And I did not find anything like that. So I left after a redundancy at the university I was at after working in academia for 14 years, getting promoted, doing all the ladder. And then I created my own journey basically as a business owner and with my own rebel playlist to match that new path. So this Academic Misfits is about how some people feel out of place in academia and the things that they've done to kind of push, pull, poke the system to fit them and their needs. And some people decide to leave after that work, and some people decide to just stay in the system and keep poking. And this is a podcast to help them with resources, information, other people's ways of surviving the system, and to give them that kind of like oomph of, yes, keep doing what you're doing. And it's just basically a Misfits Unite podcast. So, with that in mind, I'm going to come to our guest today. So, Nicole, welcome.
Hi, Luna. So happy to be here.
So happy to have you here. We talked a while ago, and so this is a long time coming. And so I'm really thankful that you've engaged with the podcast, and we'd love to hear your story because I know you've been through a lot in academia, but also you have a lot of experience outside of academia. Just reading your posts online and things like that. It's just you're very inspiring in terms of your journey. So
Thank you.
yeah, just introduce yourself to begin with and kind of tell a little backstory about your experience in academia.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm a writer's coach now and author of the Write Habit Planner, a workbook to help people write productively. And currently, I work with academics and authors and entrepreneurs to help them publish a book, or in the case of academics, to help them get their articles published. Because often, you get stuck or you don't know where to start, or you get overwhelmed. And then I come in and get people to the finish line. But it didn't always used to be that way. I used to be an academic for 10 years, did my PhD at Cambridge University here in the UK, then worked as a lecturer. And I was a political scientist working on human rights, loved the topic, didn't love the system. And we can get into that a little later, but I did burn out when I had my second child and commuted to work. So there was a time when I was pretty much non-functional and unable to even open my emails. And that was a clear sign that something isn't going well for me in academia. And I ended up quitting my job and starting my own business as a writer's coach. And this is what I do now.
That's amazing. If you could tell us a little bit about, because I ask people usually like, when did you start to feel like a misfit or something was misaligned, and you kind of alluded to that in terms of becoming a parent. Yeah, what was that like in terms of that misalignment, and were there any things that helped you within that process, your colleagues or other people? Was there a collective that helped you through it, or was it just like, you know what, I just need to quit and take care of myself?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's in hindsight, you often see the things you didn't see in the moment, right? I think the misfit or feeling like sort of an other in academia really happened when I had my first baby. It was during my PhD, and I remember someone had advised me to take care of the important baby first, which was my thesis. But I did get pregnant, and I did have my baby before I submitted. And that was already, I felt, well, everyone else is pushing ahead. I'm the one who's taking a break. And I was quite on edge during maternity leave, stressing about how I'm going to finish my thesis now that I have a baby as well. Um, and so I did finish my thesis. I think she was 6 months old or something like that. And the one thing at that time, when I did feel a bit like a misfit, the one thing that really helped me was joining a writing group at Cambridge. I actually founded it together with a friend, Moira, and we were meeting in different colleges, booking rooms, and just, we just said, okay, between 8 and 6, anyone is welcome to join. This is the room today. Just show up, bring your writing. And we would take turns in sort of taking the time and supporting each other in the breaks. And this is how I managed to finish my PhD, even though I had a little baby. Um, and that was wonderful. And that was the first time I actually realized how much it means to me to feel like a writer, to have a community of writers around me, and to sort of coach each other. We were all PhD students and postdocs on how to, overcome these blocks and the imposter and just the fear that with a young child you can never finish. And so that was my first stint with, feeling a misfit, but sort of getting out of it through writing and everything that surrounds it. And a few years later, when I was a lecturer, I had my second baby, and the story repeated itself,
Was that the
except
same university or a
no,
different one?
different university.
Right.
I
Okay.
did my postdoc still at Cambridge, and then I moved on to Nottingham. Got my golden ticket of a permanent lectureship, which I was very proud of and very keen on. And it was actually a brilliant job. It was really great. My biggest problem was that it was a long commute for me because I still lived in Cambridge, where my child was settled, and it's sort of this is where my family was. And I thought, oh, with a second child, now I know what I'm doing. I'll just have the second baby and then commute to work. And I noticed that this was really not working. I didn't notice it at first, but with every the next train ride at 5 a.m., getting out the door to my lecture that starts at 9, trying not to be late, trying to cram everything into the one day that I'm in Nottingham or the 2 3 days, rushing back home, wanting to see my toddler at the time, and then the baby as well. And so it just started to become a real drag. And when I asked for help, like to sort of cluster my teaching into fewer days, it was pretty hard to do that for me because there was a centralized way of organizing all the rooms that the teaching is scheduled in. So you couldn't really ask for sort of special treatment as a mom. It was just sort of not built into the system. And that's when I noticed I was getting frustrated and felt a bit disillusioned that the help wasn't there. I was supposed to function like everyone else who lived locally or even who didn't have kids. And so that's where the idea of can I live this academic life with my children started to sort of crumble a little bit. And it later, I still held on to it. I was just so keen on this job and took my kids to conferences and I did it all and I proved myself. Um, it did lead, spoiler alert, it did lead to burnout. And I did get seriously ill at some point.
Yeah. Just like I've been reading a lot of articles lately. I guess a lot of people are talking about the you can have it all. Women can have it all. You can do the housework, make a homemade dinner, everything nutritious, and keep the house clean and get promoted in your work. And it's just and, isn't it? And even
Yeah.
as a business owner, I'm noticing how much those same messages kind of follow you. Yeah, I think it's really fascinating that, it was a sense of community that writing feels so lonely that, do you know what I mean? You're just sitting there in front of your computer. It feels like a very lonely thing. But to have that kind of community in in the business world, but also in academia. I feel like that's one thing that's really saved me every single time is that sense of community. Is that how, like, do you
100%.
still feel like you're part of something? Do you still feel that sense of community, and that has that been helpful?
Yeah. So that was actually what got me out of burnout and even gave me this job now. Because when I did, my burnout started with panic attacks and not even being able to open emails or getting on the train and sick leave, very long sick leave. Um, and eventually me quitting my job. But during that time, I felt really I'm losing my identity because if you are assistant professor so and so, and everything has built up to this, you don't really want to let it go because this is who you are as an academic. We are very strongly connected to the job, and our identity is really sort of melded into that, right? The one thing that did help me is that I started doing a few creative writing courses just to feel like I can do something. While I was at home on sick leave, I felt like I'm worth nothing, totally, broken.
Mm.
And I started courses at the University of Cambridge. They were online because it was during COVID lockdown on how to write a short story and joined some different writing groups. And I ran a few writing groups just on Zoom. We were meeting together and writing. And sort of, I realized that I'm not completely lost. I just sort of needed to reconsider what's important to me and what brings me joy. And I sort of reclaimed writing in a different way because it was creative writing, it was fiction writing, it wasn't academic. It was really triggering to do anything academic when I was in the middle of burnout. And suddenly I felt like, well, I can even if I did leave academia, I could still be a writer and that part of my identity would still be true and be a core for me. And all these other people that I was writing with on Zoom, we were all writers. Some of us felt quite lost and down, during the lockdown. But the one thing that brought us together was writing. And yet again, this is, just like with my PhD, when I felt like, oh, I'm not really fitting into the system, with the burnout, writing again helped me find out where I want to go and what makes me feel good, and maybe also realize what doesn't make me feel good anymore.
Mm. And did you say you were doing a lot of nonfiction or fiction writing at that time?
Both.
Both.
So, yeah, at that time, I wrote a lot of fiction, short stories, fragments, flash pieces. I also took a course. I took quite a few courses just to keep myself busy. Otherwise, you would just be sitting around thinking, why have I got anxiety and burnout? Everything is awful.
Mm.
So I did a nonfiction course on sort of more creative nonfiction rather than academic writing because I knew how that works, but I didn't know how other types of nonfiction work. I wrote some memoir. I wrote some sort of um, yeah, not self-help, but sort of going in the direction of nonfiction that's not academic. And yeah, I just played.
Mm.
For the first time since many years during my burnout, I started playing with writing again. And I think that must have been the key to get me towards healing and understanding and figuring out what else I can do in my life.
Yeah, we're meant to be creative creatures. And
Yeah.
I wrote so many blogs about creativity that I think were almost gaslighting myself that I was actually doing creative things while in academia. But I think most of the creative things were that blog or the other scientists that I met who had a music background like I do, worked at Warner Brother Records. And we'd write blogs together about how the music industry is just like academia, or nobody paid us to do that. It's not something I would ever write in, my CV or dossier or whatever. But this was the community I found in Twitter, for example. There was so many creative people, and I think academia just stifles that a lot because when you're writing grants, they have to be very, they say they want innovation, but there's too much innovation or too multidisciplinary, and we can't see the links, or it's not. There's not a clear link to what's happened before. So it's not iterative or something like this, and a lot of people I talked to, even full professors, were saying, oh, I can't stick my neck out like that, Luna. Like, my job might be on the line. And I was like, you're the person that should stick their neck out. Like, that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for a full professor to go out there and do all the wacky things, and the research that I've wanted to do forever. But yeah, I don't know what your experience, what was your PhD in?
Yeah, so my PhD was in international relations and
Mm.
politics. And I think what I learned pretty quickly during the PhD is that you have to play by certain rules to be successful, to be invited to conferences, to, get an article published, to get a grant. There were specific rules. You had to follow a certain type of steps, work with a certain type of people, approach writing and publishing in a specific way to be successful. And I think, I did publish. I have, I think, 2 books, 2 academic books. I have 15 or so articles. So I was quite good at it. I played the game. The thing is, it just got me very stressed out. And I felt like, yes, I'm conforming to what's expected. I did all the things, but I sort of at some point lost the joy in it. And so basically my trick at some point, just before I left, I had figured out a trick. And my trick was I had a specific type of papers in the pipeline that I wrote with other people who had data. And I was writing the theory. And then we put it together. And that way we could put out papers. Fast is maybe the wrong word if you wait like a whole year. But sort of, I had a good and steady pipeline of papers to be pushed out. That was my sort of safety net. And then I started sort of going into the direction of writing about teaching, writing about open science, about how I'm teaching open science and reproducibility. And that second strand that I worked in wasn't particularly good for my career. I loved it. I was a part of a lot of international groups and associations around reproducibility at the time. It didn't really push my career. I knew it wouldn't really count that much because those articles weren't like hardcore research articles, but that's where my joy was. And that's where I met a lot of amazing people who were all doing this sort of on the side, trying to improve science, trying to make it more transparent, trying to teach students how to work transparently rather than hiding your data and sort of sitting on them. And I really loved that bit. I remember that for a long time, this basically helped me to stay in academia longer. I would have probably left earlier if I hadn't had that. And that's the one thing that gave me joy. But again, it wasn't enough. In the end, it wasn't enough to keep me in academia.
Yeah. And do you think that was a reflection of your values that you joined that group, like in terms of, transparency, integrity?
Yeah, 100%. So that's really the tension that I felt in academia. On the one hand, I had to write these papers and pretend certain things. They were all correct, right? There isn't sort of, I didn't lie in those papers, but you had to assert yourself. You had to write with confidence. You had to say certain things in a certain way, sort of show where the gap lies, and just you had to present yourself in a certain way. And often I maybe wasn't that confident, or I wasn't that sure if the science is really that bulletproof, but it had to be done that way. Otherwise, if you don't have a unique approach and a new finding, you wouldn't get published. And then on the other side, I had that deep knowing that everything can have errors. We are all human. If you were to run the same analysis that I ran with an updated version of the same software, pretty sure the results might be slightly different. And so I knew that too. And this created a tension for me wanting to be, truthful to the science and honest, at the same time wanting to play the game and getting published.
Yeah.
And by working in reproducibility and transparency, I could tap a little more into the ambiguity that science brings with it, or, social sciences. I don't specifically speak about STEM or anything, but science in general.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because now you're just like, you triggered me to remember a certain reviewer too, who identified themselves to me. Yeah. And that in an email, I see your shocked face for people who are just listening to the podcast, divulged their name and said, I read your paper. I'm one of the reviewers. I know I'm not supposed to like do this, but I was really shocked that you didn't cite me even once.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
And they were
That's
way above
lovely.
me. Do you know what I mean? They were way like director level at one of the health institutes and things like that. So I was like, yeah, shitting myself like, oh my God, this person could hold a lot of strings and I know is a reviewer on everything. So I basically told all of my students, we need to cite this person whenever we put out a paper. Like this is
Yeah.
it's not worth it. It's not worth having the fight. And we just have to cite this person every time we put out a paper. So all of my PhD students have cited this person. I've cited that person. And it's just so unfair. Do you know what I mean? But it's exactly what you're talking about. It's this integrity. And I started doing like editorial or like book reviews for, is it Times Higher Education or something like this? And one of them was about research integrity, and it just got me down this rabbit hole where I then started, well, it was after I left academia, I started joining a lot of networks on reproducibility, open science, because that's how I had already been thinking I wanted to go in that direction,
Mm.
especially having public reviews after that one where they can just write privately. I was like, no, I want all the public reviews, all reviewer comments should be public. The whole system should just be out in the open for people to see.
Yeah. How do you feel now about having told your students we all should cite this person?
Oh, there's so much, like you said, there's so much that we've done that we've had to do to survive. We had to play the game. And I love there's a kind of circularity, but totally opposite in saying like we had to play the game, but then your joy in playing with writing, that's where we should be. It should be that kind of play, not playing this game that you have to follow the rules. And I think, yeah, I don't know about you, but I found that I'm not the kind of person that will just shut up. I will for a little bit of time, but once I had my British citizenship, for example, I started going on all the picket lines. I joined the union. I was then going and speaking in front of, the union members about injustice. As soon as I got that British citizenship, like I'm a permanent citizen now, you can't throw me out. I mean, sure they could. Same thing with getting my kind of like senior lecturer or permanent, like felt more permanent because I was rising up the ladder. Then I was like, okay, I'm going to start talking and I'm going to start pushing. And yeah, I thought they couldn't get rid of me, but and I didn't do anything illegal, but but when you speak too much, you end up on certain lists.
Yeah. And that's the really sad thing, that you often feel you need to sort of, mold yourself in some way to fit in with how things are done. And I remember distinctly how I spoke when I was moving on towards burnout, and I could feel I was really agitated and feeling really unwell. I spoke with a few colleagues and they actually felt similarly. So behind the door, when we closed my office door and we would sit together, just two of us, from professor to postdoc, we would talk about these things privately and talk about what we think is not going well in the department or in academia in general. But then we would sort of, at the end of that chat, sort of shrug our shoulders and take a deep breath and say, "Well, let's get back to the game. Please don't tell anyone. Let's keep this private."
Mm.
And that was a real tension for me. To pretend to the outside, to the students and to sort of the world, how great academia is. And then behind closed doors, a few people were quite miserable. And I know that a few people were almost on the edge of burnout, or maybe, I don't know when I left, if anyone actually did get burnout. But yeah, I find that really hard. And that is why I left.
Mm.
One of the reasons, other than my health, I needed to be a little bit more true to myself and just center myself and think about what are my values, what do I want to put out in the world, and in which way. And it's easier as a business owner and coach for me now, because I make my decisions the way I want to make them. I work with certain clients, but I've also turned down some clients who I know I can't help. I don't feel like I need to pretend to anyone. I'm trying to be quite honest and open about my struggles with anxiety, my burnout, and also the things that are really going well, and much better salary when you are out of that quite exploitative system. And yeah, I feel like I've really turned a corner there, trying to fit in somewhere else, but making the world fit what I want, rather than trying to stay in a system that doesn't work for me.
There's so many more, like, kind of, instead of being the square peg in the round hole, there's so many different ways to fit into the world when you're a business person. Like you said, you can say no to things that don't align with you. You can set your own hours. So if you have to pick up your kids, right? Like, yeah, I mean, how have you found in terms of flexibility? Because that's one thing that a lot of people say is it's much more flexible in academia than outside. How have you kind of managed that?
Yeah, so I basically started with thinking about my future self. I was in a coaching program where that was a heavily used concept. So I started thinking about, well, let's say 3 years from now, how would my future self in an ideal world spend her day? How would she create work-life balance? How would she, deal with childcare? How would she make sure that she doesn't get burnout again? And I just basically like painted a very, maybe wasn't very realistic, but I painted a picture of how ideally life would be. And then of course it took quite a while to get there. There were lots of mini steps, but I ended up sort of tweaking my schedule and tweaking how I deal with clients more and more, so that now I am actually at the point that I'm almost there. For example, I don't work on Thursdays. I've watched my energy levels. I've noticed on Wednesday, I'm pretty worn out. And so I need Thursday with no meetings, with no, other than maybe getting a haircut or something I enjoy, going to the cafe, but nothing required of me. So, and I'm keeping to this now. Clients cannot book in with me on Thursdays. And that's just the deal. And, other things are that on specific days when I have my children, I don't work after 2:30 because that's my school run and that's what it is. And on the other days when they are with their dad, I can work until 5 and that's my choice. And so, yes, as a business owner, there is a bit of a danger to overwork because you really want to establish yourself, that you want to prove yourself and get the business up and running. But also, I was able to really work towards that ideal week that I have now. And my clients understand it because I teach my clients, 90% of them are still academics, most of them women or, people with children. I teach them how to set boundaries within what they can do, right? I know it's not perfect. And so I also live like that. And they understand that on Thursdays, don't expect an email from me.
Yeah. No, that's like, it's just putting in boundaries, isn't it? And I feel like, I don't know how you were about using boundaries in academia, but I was like, I remember joining one of the first things that I joined that started to get me thinking about leaving academia was Academics Say No on Facebook. And you'd like celebrate whenever you said no to something. And that, I think that just shows, I would love to see like how many people were in that and the growth of it. But this would have been like 2017 or something like that when I joined. And it's just, that's the demonstration of how boundaries are in academia.
Yeah.
That you're like celebrating the rare occasion that you say no.
I wish I'd known that group then, but I didn't. And I mean, now I teach how to say no. I have a whole module in my 90-day program on how to say no, and when to say yes too. But if I think of my past self, I was literally thinking I need to say yes to every conference. I need to take over all the committee roles that are given to me because I want to apply for promotion. So obviously, I'm going to be head of blah blah committee. I had to say yes to students because that was my job. I had to do the admin that was in my contract. The thing that always sort of slipped under the radar was the writing because there wasn't any time for it. But I just tried to squeeze that into the evenings and the weekends and said yes to that one too. That was the one that I really wanted to do. It- It's no surprise now that I look back that I burned out. I
Yeah.
can now, when I have a client or I talk to some people, I give workshops at the university, I can almost immediately tell which people in the group are going to be slipping into burnout if they keep going like that. But I didn't see it. I didn't have any sort of coaching experience. I didn't know there were academic coaches or anything like that. I had no idea that I was able to say no. It just
Mm.
didn't occur to me.
Yeah. Exactly. No, I was lucky. I was at Durham University and they had coaches. So I immediately joined, or maybe one of my line managers said you should have a coach. And that was really helpful because I remember the guy said to me, "Why do you want to be a professor?" And I was like, "What do you mean why? Like that's the next step. Like that's
Mhm.
it's like you learn how to do like a salsa move so that you can do like the next step, and you can put the little like flourishes on it. Like that's just the next thing. That's the next step." And then when he said, "I want you to just think about it and like what is it that you will accomplish by being professor?" And that's when I wrote down like helping other people to make it to where they want to be without all the barriers that I had experienced, especially women of color, especially, people who have anything that like is not typical or represented in academia, right? And then it took me years to then realize after that I can do that outside of it in the same way that you were like, I'm still a writer outside of this. I can still have I can create a community of writers, not within Cambridge, but outside. Was there any like resource, like how did you break into that kind of mindset of I can do this? Did you have books that helped you, podcasts, or was it coaches? Like what were the big things that kind of help you make that transition from I can do this outside of these structures?
Mm. It was really, I went and got myself coaching from different types of people.
Mm,
I didn't have coaching on how to leave academia.
mm,
At the point when I was so ill, it was almost impossible to think of, trying to get a career coach and go at it in sort of a very systematic way. I needed to get my mindset sorted out first, and I coached with someone called Danielle Delamar, who also has a podcast, The Self-Compassionate Professor. And she is a career and wellness coach for people in academia, but also people who are or might want to be leaving. And it wasn't coaching on, a checklist how to improve your CV to get a job in industry, but she coached me on. It was a very meditative approach. She got me into a meditative state to ask myself if I didn't have any constraints, any money worry, if I didn't want to prove myself, what would I actually want to do? Um, and I told her almost in the first session, I want to quit academia. I just need, backup. I need someone to allow me to do this. And she asked me other questions, about how I would like my life to look like in my future, the future self idea. Or she would ask me, what would academia have to look like for you to be able to manage and do it healthily? And I gave her a whole list of how I would love academia to change.
Oh my God, I need that list.
Right. And so the thing is, we talked about, well, is it realistic within the next 2-3 years at my institution um, that these things are going to be put in place, either with me pushing or just generally with the. And the thing was, academia isn't going in the direction that I needed it to be,
Mm.
a place that takes well-being into account and doesn't exploit people, and the constant pressure to publish and all of the things that we all know. So I sort of looked at my future self vision, the vision that I had to be a person who feels good about themselves and has some joy and fulfillment in their life and feels productive, versus the container of academia. And she asked me, well, now knowing this, what do you want to do? And I said, yes, I need to quit. It took me still a few more weeks of sort of bringing up the courage to sit there and type the letter into my computer. Dear so and so, I hereby wish to. It was hard. Like I cried while I was typing because I knew I'm giving up my whole identity, the whole job security, everything I had known, and I wasn't like a coach yet, didn't know. I actually didn't have a follow-on job. I just had the knowing that I cannot go on like this. So I, yeah, definitely, I really, really needed the coaching. All the self-help books were great. There are lots of great books about, for example, Benjamin Hardy, Be Your Future Self Now is a great book. But I needed someone to talk to. I actually did take coaching with Benjamin Hardy, the author. I joined one of his programs. I just felt that coaching was needed to make the decision and to make it with confidence, and just to feel like I don't know what the future will hold, but I'm confident enough to know that I want to carve out something new for myself, which was extremely scary.
Yeah, I wish I'd had that kind of coaching to begin with, and I think that's why I created my coaching programs like that. Like the inner work that you need to do, and the awareness and knowledge of yourself, and acceptance, compassion.
Yeah.
Because I just hired a coach that went through the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. By week 6, you should have a business and go. And I was still in burnout.
Yeah.
And I think I burned myself out trying to do that with that person. Um, and then just like cut out for the next 5-6 months, because I think it was just like burnout on top of burnout. And
Yeah.
instead, I just did dancing, which I just saw that there's a new article saying that, dancing is like the number one therapy for depression, anxiety. But I think the number of studies that made up that effect size was very small. So grain of salt, but it definitely helped me. I did a burnout, bounce back from burnout, and then I did people who are unemployed, getting them back into confident, empowered people through dance.
Hmm.
And that was incredible. I made, when you were talking about community, that's the community who saved my life,
Hmm.
were those dancers that I danced with. Yeah, so that really resonates in terms of finding yourself. Yeah, so did you apply for jobs, or were you then thinking, I'm going to start my own thing?
No, I mean, before I quit, I was on the job market to try and get a job closer to where I lived.
Mm.
That didn't really lead anywhere. Maybe subconsciously, I didn't really want that. Actually, maybe I didn't even want to be in academia anymore. No, I did not apply for any jobs. It sounds a bit childish, but I just didn't want a line manager anymore, ever in my life.
I love
Like,
it.
I'm very happy to work with universities now. They buy my coaching in-house. They bring me in for workshops, or they bring me in with I don't know, a professor who needs to get this book published. I'm very happy to collaborate, and I work with universities now, and well, much better pay, but on my terms. I sort of, maybe in the future. No, actually, no. I don't think I can ever work. I can ever work as an employee again. I was just thinking if there's a scenario, but I couldn't come up with any example. And it's not because I think, oh, I'm better than everyone else, or I'm too good to have a boss. It's nothing like that. And I don't actually think every boss is awful. I coach a lot of high-level academics who are really wanting to be a good leader and really take care of, the people working with them. It's not like that. It's just, I personally, I tasted freedom. I tasted it, and I'm not willing to give it up, even if it means there are months where I don't earn as much money. There are some lulls here and there. Of course, there's a bit of fear around, well, as a single mom now, can I sustain this business to take care of my kids? Those things are there, and I accept them. I work through them. I'm still doing coaching with Danielle and other coaches, getting help. But the freedom, it's almost, maybe it's even my number one value,
Mm.
that I need to have the freedom of time, the freedom to create what I want, the freedom of relationships, picking who I work with, the freedom of money. What do I work on, for how much, in which way? Yeah. So I forgot what the question was, but
Whether
Yeah, I
you
did not
applied for
apply for
jobs,
any
but yeah,
jobs.
you didn't apply
Yeah.
for any jobs. Yeah, I think that yeah, freedom that is like a big value to have, and I think for me also impact. You probably make a lot of, like when you're working like we do, you see such big transformations. Would you say that?
Mhm.
I mean, because the transformation being like somebody has a book, I feel like that's a huge transformation for that person.
It's not just publishing the book. Of course, it gives you massive confidence to get something published, but the journey, the process to get there, like most of my coaching, I think 10% is coaching on the book, on writing productively, on, getting into writing flow, but the other big percentage is overcoming mindsets and old patterns. I'm actually more like a life coach or a therapist. It just happens that I love working with writers because I am one and I understand them really well. Um, there's so much in terms of setting your boundaries, overcoming the inner critic, reframing those nagging negative thoughts that come and hit you when you are trying to make a big leap and be creative, create something a bit, bold. Those negative thoughts will come your way, and
Mm.
they can come, and what do you do when they come, and how do you deal with this and still keep creating? So yeah, I love this kind of work, and it's it's not just about getting the book published. I mean, I have someone who got a publishing deal a few weeks ago. It was amazing. Another person finished her novel. The next person is writing a book proposal. So there are. It's, of course, that makes me so happy. But I can see people transform when they work with me as a writer, academic or non-academic, doesn't matter, because you, as a writer, there are certain things that can get in your way, and the tools you develop to get over them, to get over the blocks, they actually help you transform your life. You can apply it to your partner, your children, your friendships, like all the tools about setting boundaries, for example, or not getting burnout. They are life tools. Yeah, I'll shut up now. I get overly excited about this stuff.
Oh, it's fascinating. I love it. And I was just like thinking that is the number one thing. That's why I have programs. I was selling like, oh, I'll transform your CV to a resume, but then people would be like, but I don't feel like this resume represents me, or I don't think I'm as confident as what you have portrayed me as in this. And
Mhm.
it really needs to be a collaboration now, and I do it as part of the whole Life After Academia program, or something like this, where it's like we go through that confidence and the stories that we tell ourselves, those negative thoughts, but also finding empowering stories in that, because a lot of trauma is about rewriting our stories with our own selves as the hero in the middle of it, and it's finding those strengths, not just as like, oh, you're resilient, because that can be used as a stick as well, right? Like, be more resilient as I, pelt you with this, but really finding those ways that you naturally, or, in a way that it reflects your talent, are able to navigate systems to then come up with, having gasped a bit of air. Like, even that is something to celebrate.
Mm.
So I believe that that's a big part of any of our journeys, even in the business world, which is why I still have multiple coaches as well. Because there's days when I have to just put in a Voxer message and go, everything sucks and I don't know if I can do it. And, you just need to hear that voice on the other side saying, I believe in you, and you've done it before. And you just have to go, right, I've done it before. I can do it again. I've got the self efficacy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I definitely see that as a huge benefit to the work that you do. And so, what kind of services, if people are interested in working with you, do you offer? Because I know that you have a LinkedIn profile. I was looking through that, and you do a lot of different things. So, yeah, just tell us about where people can find you, and I'll put in the show notes all the links and
Mhm.
any. You have an amazing book behind you, and I know like our listeners might not be able to see it, so maybe you could talk about that book as well.
Yeah, the easiest way to get started, I mean, I work with people who want to get their writing done in the simplest way. It could be academic, it could be non-academic. I have some academics publishing trade books, like normal books, for example. The easiest way to start is with the Right Habit Planner. There's a website called therighthabitplanner.com. You
Oh,
can get it on Amazon, and it's a workbook. It's undated, and it takes you through very specific steps to plan out your writing projects and then to actually do them week by week and tick off your tasks, break everything down, slot it in. So it's basically my coaching method, but in a workbook for those people who just want to start easy. It's not massively expensive, and I've I have like thousands of people now that either got the ebook a while ago when it was still free, and then I turned it into an actual book that you can buy on Amazon, and it's selling really well. And lots of people tell me how helpful it is to just sort of open the page. Rather, it's not a self-help book that gives you like 10 pages of how to write productively, but it's basically you open the book, it asks you a question about your priority. Everything is so easily laid out that you get into the planning and the writing rather than thinking about the writing. And so the Right Habit Planner is the starting point.
yeah. It's like you have your commitment to something, but then it's about putting it into action.
Yeah, it was a real it was a compromise between, obviously I want to coach everyone, but I also need to earn a living. And so not everyone can afford a high ticket coaching program that, like my 90-day program, it takes people through, writing a whole article or, the book proposal, 3 book chapters with accountability every day. Not everyone can afford that. And I try to take the simplest version of that, the most effective one, and turn it into the planner and workbook. And I also didn't want to write a self-help book. I actually started writing one that called this the Right Habit Method or something. And I realized I'm just dumping more advice on people instead of making them do the writing. And so the planner is sort of the low-key version of making people write without, the high ticket attached to it. That's why, I mean, I actually use it myself. Mine is almost finished. It's 52 weeks undated, and I have 2 or 3 weeks left. And then I'm going to grab the next copy on my shelf and keep going. So this is sort of the number one thing. And the second thing I would like to mention is I help people write books, nonfiction. I mean, I have a novelist that I work with as well, but I specialize in nonfiction. And I have a really great free mini course that's called Start Your Book in 5 Days. So there's a website, startyourbookin5days.com. 5 is a number. And when you sign up to this, you get 5 messages from me and trainings, even audio files and a workbook and everything. It's all free to get you from a rough idea about what your book might be. It could be academic or a nonfiction book, self-help. And you go through all the steps each day. And in the end, you have an outline, a clear idea of your audience, and you basically have a mini package that helps you now to actually go and start writing the book. Startyourbookin5days.com. That's another, it's free and anyone can download that and get started that way as well.
And do you suggest people then use that kind of workbook or whatever they've produced to then try to find an agent or a publisher? Or like, what do most of your clients do? Or do they self-publish? Yeah, I've gotten a lot of questions about this aspect of it, like the next step.
So this course is really just to get you to figure out your idea and outline. And then what I do then often with clients together is create a book proposal, which is often several pages long. It really goes into depth about what exactly is the message, how does it show throughout the chapters? What's the flow throughout the book? What's the primary market, the secondary market, competing titles and all of that. So that is a little bit bigger. And I would recommend to any academic or non-academic wanting to publish a book, doesn't matter if you're going to try and get an agent or go to a publisher or self-publish, to write a book proposal. Because with a book proposal, you clarify your own thoughts. Your whole idea becomes just you can see if it's doable or not. You really see what belongs in this book, and you see what belongs in the next book. Most of my clients have more than one book in their head, and we need to sort out, what's for the next one and what is for now. And then you can go on with that book proposal, and either you write it, pay for an editor, publish it, let's say on Amazon, maybe get someone to make your cover professionally. It's a little bit better than doing it just yourself. Or you approach an agent if you want to write a trade book with one of the big 5 publishers, like Penguin or something. Or you approach an academic publisher with the book proposal, maybe 1 or 2 chapters written. And I've just helped someone to get a deal with an academic publisher. And you can sort of, it really depends where you want your book to land. And just to say, all the methods of publishing your book are valid. I personally have published academic books with academic publishers, but my writing planner, the Write Habit Planner, is self-published because I'm a businesswoman. I know how to do it. I'm my own publisher. I have full control. I can decide if I want to update something in there. I just re-upload the PDF into Amazon. I decide on the price. I can send it for free to anyone I want. People who want to work with me, they get the book for free. So I have so much more control with my planner that I really enjoy that, the self-publishing route for that particular book and purpose.
Wow, so interesting. So what as you were talking, I was thinking, did the book that you wrote or books that you wrote help you get these contracts with universities to then deliver these workshops, or did it happen the other way around? Because I know a lot of people are like, how did you get your contracts with universities, Luna? And yeah, so now I'm just throwing the question out to you.
Yeah. So as a business owner, I had to learn to make myself visible. And I found that incredibly hard because as an academic, of course, you go to conferences, but you always sort of, I don't want to say I hid behind my work, but my work spoke for itself. I wouldn't go up on the stage and tell everyone how amazing I am. But as a coach and a writer's coach, I do need to show the world that my clients are getting results. The books are getting published. The articles are getting through. The grants are being, approved. And that is one part of it. So I do have a newsletter where I give people tips, but I also often mention what a client achieved recently. I put it on social media, all of that. I go on podcasts and talk about my work and talk about how amazing it is to do the work that I do. And all of that serves the purpose that people who need me can find me, including individuals and universities. And then the Right Habit Planner, I wrote that book or, that workbook 2-3 years into my journey because I needed to first try out on my clients what really works. Everything that's in the planner is tested by hundreds of people who worked with me. There was a lot of stuff that I had great ideas about, didn't work, chucked it out. And so the Right Habit Planner now, interestingly, people find it on Amazon, or they find it if I put it on socials on my website. People now read the planner, try it out. And some of them who need more, including people at a university who might want to hire me, they then contact me. I have so many people telling me, I found your book. What else do you have? And so this is why I love working with, for example, entrepreneurs, because a book will bring you clients. Not everyone who buys the book and reads the book is going to become a client, but those who want a little taste of how you function, how you work with people, they get your book and then they might contact you. And that's how I got, I think this is how I got my contract with Cambridge University, where I coach my 90-day program that I usually run separately within Cambridge, in-house, because I think they found the Right Habit Planner. Maybe they found me on a podcast and they decided, well, we need someone like Nicole to come in and do this for us.
Yes. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's great because I think it is a good way. I mean, there's different ways that people can find you, right? Like they can search on Google and then you have to play with SEO to do that, and maybe social media, and that's how people find out about what you do and sharing testimonials there. Podcasts, podcasts, people find out about you. Like there's different ways and strategies, but I definitely think a book is time-tested technique for getting people to know that you are approachable, have services, know what you're talking about, and that you have the authority and the know-how to get them to where they want to be. Yeah, so I love you
Exactly.
sharing that because I think a lot of people maybe don't have that in mind, don't have that strategy yet because academia doesn't prepare us for any of that stuff. And yeah, I mean, unless you're, part of like starting to do some of the stuff with like business schools and doing like enterprising work in academia, it's really hard to get an idea of those things. I think I only started to get an idea of them when I started doing more knowledge exchange work and knowledge mobilization. But, at the time, when was the knowledge exchange framework in the UK? Like it wasn't that long ago, so it was kind of new. I knew about it, but I didn't know a lot about it when I was in academia. Most of the stuff I've learned has been after, right? So, but that's where you start to get an idea of like a mindset of like, what do clients need and how do I get them to know that I'm the one that can solve their problems, right? So, no, I love that we were able to kind of cover that for listeners as well. If you're thinking about starting your own business, these are some of the things. But yeah, definitely get in touch with Nicole to write your book because thank you so much for my book, my little habit book. I started looking through it and I was like, this is so easy to just get started. Like I didn't have a lot of like second guessing as I was looking at it. I was like, oh, okay, this is like a simple way. And since I started the podcast, I'll probably, now be thinking about a book because I wanted to do one before I even thought about another one. But, I do get my ADHD goes, what's next? So thank you for that. I think it's really valuable. And the fact that you use it yourself, your clients use it, speaks a lot too. It's not just, a cash grab like, oh, everybody's putting out like little habit notebooks or ebooks. You see all the companies doing that are AI based and all this kind of stuff. But this one actually, you can see the benefit of it. So thank you for putting that together for people.
Yeah, thanks for saying that.
Yeah.
And then just to add, not everyone who is in academia wants to leave,
Mm.
but a lot of people want to start consulting, for example, or just to sort of like, brush up the salary or know that that there's something else you might want to do later on. And I don't want to promote you have to have a side hustle or anything, but for example, I have a client who is going to write a book now that is almost a trade book. It's almost a nonfiction book, but still within the academic range, because he knows that it will probably, and he has done that sort of thing in the past, it will get him consultancies. And that will help him to do work that he enjoys, which has to do with public impact and outreach and making, sort of making a change in the world beyond publishing a paper.
Mm.
Plus, it'll give him some money that he can then use and spend on whatever he wants to. And it's not connected to his salary and teaching and admin. So he made a conscious choice. He is a full-on academic. He will stay in academia, but he's going to write a book that will appeal to a wider audience for the specific purpose of getting consultancies. And this is something very small that any academic can think about if they are interested in exploring a different side to bringing their knowledge and expertise to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm working with somebody, or I was just working with somebody who's doing the same. So he just got promoted to professor. He was looking for consultancy work, and now, not with my help, but with somebody else, is working on a graphic novel as a novel way to share information from science, which I think is amazing. I just love like art and science coming together that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely think, yeah, if I had been able to do that, I got consultancy through other ways, but I should say, now that you're talking about books, I have contributed a chapter to an academic misfits book that's coming out probably February next year. So for all our listeners, I have a chapter at least in that book. The book preceded my Academic Misfits podcast. I just, said to them, I'd love to have a podcast that has the same title. And they were like, do it, Luna. So the editors were really supportive of this podcast. So yeah, so that's coming out. So I just wanted to tag that in there while you were talking about
Congratulations.
that. Thank you. So are there any other things that you want to advertise? I'm going to put in the show notes all the ways to get in touch with Nicole because you do want to get in touch. Maybe the link to the Amazon book as well. We'll put in there. So I'll be sure to get that from Nicole. And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. How are you feeling? And I did want to ask you because you're the person who was the inspiration for me asking some things about this journey of being in academia as a misfit or being out of academia as a misfit. Sometimes we need like a really good breakup song to remember or to celebrate not being in academia. So it doesn't have to be a breakup academic mixtape song, but what's on your playlist this week?
So on my playlist is I don't even know if it's a breakup song. It's called "See Her Out" by Francis and the Lights.
Oh,
And it's a really upbeat song. It's a song that is played in one of those Netflix series. The Netflix series is called Nobody Wants This, and there's a scene where a couple is kissing and you can see the hope for the future. There is something good going on for them. And this song is playing and it has some synthesizers in it, but it's really, really cool. And it's such an upbeat song. I'm playing it on repeat. It's called "See Her Out"
See Her Out.
by Francis and the Lights.
Oh my
Highly
gosh.
recommend
I'm
it.
going to have to listen right after this. That sounds great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've just started putting together a playlist on YouTube as well, which is the Quit Your Job playlist on Luna Leadership. So the first one starts with, I think, is the first one. Well, in there is like Ike and Tina Turner. There's like, obviously, Take This Job and Shove It. But there's also like School's Out for Summer.
Love
And
that.
Pink Floyd, it's like such a just hodgepodge of different songs, but also like Lizzo and things that just bring that joy that you're saying, the hope and the joy. So we need
Yeah.
some of that too. And it's not all about anger. It's also about like, what do I have to look forward to? Freedom.
It's that moment where, although your life might be super busy, you might be overwhelmed, there is often a moment where where something opens. Like you feel that there might be more for you on the horizon. You might not know what it is. You might not trust that you're going to get it. You don't know the path to get there. You just have that moment. I might be able to do more. And that's the moment you can often get with music. And that's the moment that I needed to quit.
Ah, I love that. Oh, I'm gonna have to think more about that and how music speaks to those moments. Yeah, I love that. You know how we would always remember, I don't know if you had senior prom, but in the US we have senior prom and you always like the song for that prom is like, you know what I mean? It's supposed to signify something for your final year, final moment, final celebration. Yeah, and I just forgot what ours was as I was speaking, but it was something really cheesy because it was 1992.
What was it? Do you know?
Oh, what was it? Oh, all I can think of is like The Way You Look Tonight, but that would have been like a little bit later, but it was something like something about the night and how this is like the last moment, but I can't remember the name of the song. I'll have to come back to you and tell you what it was.
Okay,
I had it in
do
my
that.
mind and then it went like that. As soon as I tried to, when you try to look at something and it just goes
Mhm.
because you focused on it and you're like, where'd that go? But yeah, that's how. Yeah, I think there are certain moments and certain songs and certain ways that we kind of honor transitions in our lives. A lot of time, sometimes when I've honored transitions, it's been about getting a tattoo. um, but music is also another of those. When I did have a big breakup in my life, I made a whole playlist for myself that was called like Love Luna, like it was
Oh.
and I have that on Spotify still. And I think you're right.
Wow.
There is something about joy, sadness, honoring those emotions because none of them are negative. They all tell us something. They're always there to guide us. And that was a
Yeah.
huge thing that I think I've learned through music, is that every emotion I have is something to cherish.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, this was such a great conversation. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Nina.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And yeah, still till next time. And do, I've never said this at the end, but do rate, subscribe. We need to get some ratings up there on Spotify. I think you can rate, and on Apple Podcasts. So do give a 5-star review if you enjoyed it. All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.